There are moments in life when the greatest battle is not around you, it is within you. You can smile in public while silently fighting storms in your thoughts. You can pray with your mouth while your mind is exhausted from fear, disappointment, anxiety, and pain. Some people are not tired physically, they are tired mentally. They are tired of carrying pressure, confusion, heartbreak, and invisible struggles nobody understands. But today, hear this clearly. God is still in the business of transforming minds, restoring strength, and rebuilding broken people. The enemy knows that if he can control your thoughts, he can control your direction. That is why so many people live trapped in fear, insecurity, regret, and hopelessness. The battlefield of your future is often the battlefield of your mind. Negative thoughts become chains. Fear becomes a prison. Doubt becomes a wall between you and your destiny. But God did not create you to live defeated. He created you to walk in victory, peace, confidence, and spiritual authority. Sometimes life hits you so hard that you stop recognizing yourself. The passion you once had disappears. The confidence you once carried fades away. You begin questioning your purpose, your value, and even your future. But just because your spirit feels weak does not mean God has abandoned you. In fact, some of God's greatest transformations begin in seasons of brokenness. God is saying, bring me your exhausted mind, bring me your anxious thoughts, bring me your fears, your stress, your confusion, and your emotional wounds. I can heal what nobody else sees. Transformation does not happen by accident. It happens when you stop feeding fear and start feeding faith. Your mind cannot become strong if it constantly consumes negativity. What you listen to matters. What you speak matters. What you believe matters. Every day you must make the decision to replace lies with truth, fear with faith, and despair with hope. You cannot think like a defeat. Ed person and expect to live a victorious life. God wants to renew your thinking so he can elevate your living. Many people ask God to change their situation while refusing to change their mindset. But breakthrough often begins internally before it appears externally. Strength is not pretending you never struggle. Real strength is continuing to trust God while fighting battles nobody knows about. Real strength is waking up after disappointment and still believing God has a purpose for your life. Real strength is refusing to quit when your emotions tell you to give up. Some of you have been carrying mental burdens for too long. You replay old failures in your mind. You relive painful memories. You allow the opinions of people to define your identity. But God never called you to live chained to your past. Your past may explain you, but it does not own you. God can give you a new beginning, a renewed spirit, and a transformed mind. Stop speaking defeat over your life. Stop declaring we. Act next over your future. Your words have power. Speak life even when life feels heavy. Speak hope even when circumstances look dark. Speak faith even before you see results. Sometimes your breakthrough begins with changing the language you use about yourself. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not permanently broken. God can restore what stress tried to destroy. He can rebuild confidence where fear once lived. He can give peace where chaos once ruled. He can make you emotionally strong again, spiritually focused again, and mentally disciplined again. Do not let temporary pain convince you that your future is hopeless. Storms do not last forever. Difficult seasons are not permanent destinations. God often uses pressure to develop strength, wisdom, endurance, and maturity inside his people. The struggle may be painful, but it is not pointless. Sometimes God allows isolation so he can speak to you without distraction. Sometimes he allows weakness so you learn to depend. Ninth on his strength instead of your own. Sometimes he allows delays because he is preparing your mind for the blessing you prayed for. And when God transforms your mind, everything changes. You stop panicking over every problem. You stop living for people's approval. You stop allowing fear to control your decisions. You begin walking with peace, clarity, wisdom, and confidence because you finally understand that God is greater than every battle you face. Today, make this your prayer. God, transform my mind. Remove fear from me. Remove doubt from me. Remove anxiety from me. Heal my thoughts. Heal my emotions. Heal my perspective. Teach me to think with faith, walk with confidence, and trust you completely. Make me strong again. And hear this promise. The same God who carried you before will carry you again. The same God who strengthened you in past seasons will strengthen you again. You may feel weak today, but weakness is not your final destination. God is rebuilding you, renewing you, and preparing you for greater days ahead. Your mind will not stay in darkness forever. Your heart will not stay heavy forever. Your strength will return. Your peace will return. Your joy will return. And when God finishes transforming you, you will rise stronger, wiser, deeper, and more powerful than before. The greatest battles in life are often not the battles people can see. They are not always financial struggles, relationship problems, or physical hardships. Many times, the most painful battles happen silently inside the human mind. A person can appear calm on the outside while fighting chaos within. They can smile in public while privately carrying fear, anxiety, insecurity, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Some people are not losing the battle around them, they are losing the battle within them. The enemy understands something many people fail to recognize. If your mind becomes weak, your life becomes vulnerable. That is why attacks often begin in your thoughts before they appear in your circumstances. Fear begins as a thought. Doubt begins as a thought. Discouragement begins as a thought. Hopelessness begins as a thought. The mind is the control center of your direction, your decisions, your emotions, and your confidence. When your thinking becomes poisoned with negativity, it becomes difficult to move forward with faith. Many people spend years trapped not because doors are closed, but because their minds are chained. They constantly replay failures, mistakes, disappointments, and painful memories. They relive old wounds so often that the pain becomes part of their identity. Instead of expecting victory, they expect failure. Instead of expecting peace, they expect disappointment. Their thoughts become prisons that limit their future. There are people listening right now who are exhausted mentally. They wake up tired because their mind never rests. Even in quiet moments, anxiety speaks loudly. Fear whispers constantly. Stress keeps them awake at night. They overthink every situation. They carry invisible pressure nobody understands. And over time, those mental battles begin affecting every part of life. It affects relationships, confidence, motivation, decision-making, and spiritual growth. That is why protecting your mind is one of the most important responsibilities you have. You cannot allow every negative voice to live inside your head. You cannot allow every criticism to define you. You cannot allow fear to become the loudest voice in your life. Some people have accepted negative thinking as normal because they have lived with it for so long. They have become comfortable with doubt, comfortable with insecurity, and comfortable with emotional heaviness. But God never intended for his people to live mentally defeated. A weak mind will make small problems appear impossible. A fearful mind will create storms even in peaceful situations. A doubtful mind will talk you out of opportunities, blessings, and purpose. That is why the battle over your thoughts is so serious. The enemy does not always need to destroy your life externally if he can convince you internally that you are already defeated. Sometimes the hardest prison to escape is the prison of your own thinking. People can be free physically but trapped mentally. They can have opportunities in front of them yet still live in fear. They can have talent, purpose, and potential, but never walk in confidence because their thoughts constantly tell them they are not enough. Negative thinking slowly drains strength from the soul. Many people underestimate how powerful thoughts truly are. Thoughts influence emotions. Emotions influence actions. Actions influence direction. And direction influences destiny. What repeatedly lives in your mind eventually shapes the life you experience. That is why you must become intentional about what you feed your mind daily. If you constantly consume negativity, fear will grow. If you constantly focus on problems, discourage. Aging will grow. But when you feed your spirit with faith, truth, hope, and prayer, strength begins to rise again. The enemy wants your mind distracted, confused, fearful, and overwhelmed because a distracted mind struggles to hear God clearly. A fearful mind struggles to trust God completely. A discouraged mind struggles to keep moving forward. That is why so many people give up too early. They lose the battle internally before they ever face the battle externally. But hear this clearly. Your thoughts do not have to control your future. Just because fear enters your mind does not mean it has permission to stay there. Just because negative thoughts appear does not mean they are true. You have the power to reject thoughts that do not align with peace, faith, wisdom, and truth. You must learn to stop agreeing with thoughts that destroy your confidence and weaken your spirit. God wants to transform your mind because transformation always begins internally before it appears externally. Before your situation changes, your thinking often has to change. Before your confidence returns, your perspective must shift. Before you can walk in peace, you must stop entertaining fear. Mental renewal is not weakness, it is spiritual warfare. Every day you must choose faith over fear, truth over lies, and peace over panic. There are moments when your greatest victory will not be defeating people around you, but defeating the negative thoughts fighting within you. Some of the strongest people are not those who never struggle mentally, but those who keep trusting God while fighting battles nobody else can see. Real strength is continuing to believe even when your thoughts try to pull you toward hopelessness. You cannot always control what happens around you, but you can decide what controls your mind. And when God begins renewing your thoughts, healing your emotions, and restoring your inner peace, you become stronger than the fear that once tried to destroy you. There are seasons in life when people feel emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and spiritually weak. Sometimes the pressure becomes so heavy that even simple responsibilities feel overwhelming. You try to stay strong, but deep inside you feel tired from carrying burdens nobody sees. Many people are fighting silent battles every single day. They are smiling in public while privately struggling with fear, stress, disappointment, heartbreak, anxiety, and emotional pain. The truth is, some wounds cannot be seen with human eyes because they exist within the heart and mind. Life has a way of wearing people down. Unexpected problems, broken relationships, financial struggles, betrayal, failures, and unanswered prayers can slowly drain strength from the soul. A person who was once confident can suddenly become insecure. A person who once had peace can suddenly feel overwhelmed. A person who once dreamed boldly can become trapped in fear and discouragement. Pain changes people when they try to carry it all. 1. There are moments when people begin questioning themselves because they no longer recognize who they have become. They remember a time when they had joy, passion, energy, and confidence, but now they feel emotionally empty. They feel disconnected from peace. They feel weak in areas where they once felt strong. Sometimes the hardest part is pretending everything is okay while silently falling apart internally. But no matter how weak you feel today, God specializes in restoring broken strength. He understands emotional exhaustion. He understands silent tears. He understands mental pressure. He sees every hidden battle that nobody else notices. While people may only see your appearance, God sees your heart. He knows when your mind feels tired. He knows when your spirit feels discouraged. He knows when fear has become heavier than faith. Many people think strength means never struggling emotionally, but real strength is continuing to move forward even while carrying pain. Real Street. NGTH is praying while your heart feels heavy. Real strength is waking up every morning and refusing to quit despite the pressure surrounding your life. Some of the strongest people are those who continue trusting God while fighting battles nobody around them understands. The enemy wants emotional exhaustion to convince you that your future is hopeless. He wants weakness to make you believe you will never recover. He wants disappointment to make you lose confidence in yourself and in God's plan for your life. But weakness is not your identity. Exhaustion is not your permanent condition. Pain may visit your life, but it does not have permission to define your destiny. God can restore what stress tried to destroy. He can rebuild confidence where insecurity once lived. He can replace fear with peace and confusion with clarity. He can renew your emotional strength when life has drained every ounce of energy from your spirit. Sometimes people search everywhere for peace without realizing T. True restoration begins when they bring their burdens honestly before God. Too many people carry emotional pain in silence because they fear being misunderstood. They hide their struggles behind fake smiles and public appearances. They convince themselves they must handle everything alone. But healing begins when you stop pretending you are okay and become honest about your need for restoration. God cannot heal the version of you that hides behind pride, fear, and denial. But when you bring him your weakness, your anxiety, your brokenness, and your emotional exhaustion, he begins rebuilding you from the inside out. Sometimes emotional weakness develops gradually. You do not become discouraged overnight. It happens little by little through repeated disappointments, unanswered questions, criticism, fear, and pressure. Day after day, the mind becomes tired. The heart becomes heavy. Motivation begins disappearing. Even faith can feel difficult during painful seasons. But just because your strength feels small does not mean God has left you. There are moments when God allows difficult seasons not to destroy you, but to teach you dependence on him. Sometimes people rely so heavily on their own strength that they forget where true strength comes from. Weakness has a way of humbling the heart and redirecting the soul back toward God. It reminds people that they were never designed to carry life's burdens alone. Restoration does not always happen instantly. Sometimes God rebuilds people gradually. He restores peace one day at a time. He heals emotional wounds step by step. He renews confidence little by little. Some days progress feels slow, but healing is still happening beneath the surface. Even when you cannot feel immediate change, God may already be strengthening areas within you that were once broken. One of the enemy's greatest strategies is convincing people that because they feel weak now, they will always remain weak. But feelings are temporary, difficult. Seasons are temporary. Emotional exhaustion is temporary. God's power is greater than your current condition. The same God who carried you through previous battles can strengthen you again. There are people listening who need to stop speaking defeat over themselves. Stop calling yourself broken beyond repair. Stop believing the lie that you are too damaged to recover. Stop thinking your best days are behind you. God is still restoring people. He is still healing minds. He is still rebuilding hearts. He is still renewing strength in those who feel exhausted by life. You may feel emotionally tired today, but God can breathe new strength into your spirit again. He can give peace where anxiety once ruled. He can give confidence where insecurity once lived. He can calm the chaos in your mind and restore stability within your heart. And when God restores your strength, you do not simply survive the storm, you rise stronger, wiser, and deeper than before. Transformation never begins on the outside first. Before a person's life changes, their thinking must change. Before confidence returns, perspective must shift. Before peace can grow, fear must lose its control over the mind. Many people want God to change their circumstances while refusing to allow him to change their mindset. But true transformation begins internally long before it becomes visible externally. The way you think influences the way you live. Thoughts shape emotions, emotions shape actions, and actions shape direction. If your thinking is filled with fear, your decisions will reflect fear. If your mind constantly expects failure, you will approach opportunities with doubt and hesitation. If your thoughts are controlled by insecurity, you will never fully recognize the value God placed within you. A negative mindset quietly limits potential before a person even begins moving forward. That is why renewing the mind is one of the most important parts of spiritual growth. You cannot continue thinking like a defeated person and expect to walk in victory. You cannot constantly speak hopelessness and expect peace to grow in your life. Some people pray for change while feeding their minds with negativity every day. They surround themselves with fear, doubt, toxic conversations, and discouraging influences, then wonder why their spirit feels weak. What you repeatedly feed your mind eventually shapes your outlook on life. Transformation begins when you stop agreeing with every negative thought that enters your mind. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every fear deserves your agreement. The enemy often attacks through thoughts because he understands how powerful the mind truly is. If he can fill your thinking with doubt, fear, insecurity, and discouragement, he can weaken your confidence before you ever face the situation itself. Many people are fighting battles today, not because they lack ability, but because they have accepted lies about themselves for too long. They believe that you are not smart enough, strong enough, valuable enough, or capable enough. Over time, those lies begin shaping their identity. They start living beneath their potential because their mindset has convinced them they cannot rise higher. But God did not create you to live trapped by fear-based thinking. He did not create you to constantly expect defeat. He wants your mind renewed with truth, faith, wisdom, and peace. Transformation happens when you begin replacing destructive thoughts with life-giving truth. Every time fear says you will fail, faith must respond, God is with me. Every time insecurity says you are not enough, truth must remind you that your value does not come from people's opinions. Every time hopelessness says nothing will ever change, faith must declare that God is still working behind the scenes. Renewing the mind requires intentional daily effort. It does not happen automatically. Just as the body becomes weak without proper nourishment, the mind becomes weak when it constantly consumes negativity. Some people spend hours listening to fear, criticism, drama, and discouragement, yet spend very little time feeding their spirit with truth, prayer, wisdom, and faith. Eventually, whatever dominates your thinking begins dominating your emotions and decisions. That is why guarding your mind is so important. You must become careful about what influences your thoughts. Some environments constantly produce stress, bitterness, fear, and negativity. Some conversations drain peace instead of building strength. Some habits slowly poison the mind until anxiety and discouragement become normal. You cannot expect peace while constantly feeding chaos into your spirit. Transformation also requires discipline. Feelings cannot always be trusted because emotions change constantly. Some days you will feel strong, and other days you may feel discouraged. But transformation is built through consistent choices, not temporary emotions. Choosing faith when fear feels louder is part of growth. Choosing peace when anxiety tries to control you is part of growth. Choosing truth over negative thinking is part of growth. There are people who believe transformation means becoming perfect, but renewal is actually a process. God often changes people step by step. He teaches them to think differently little by little. He heals emotional wounds gradually. He rebuilds confidence over time. Some changes happen instantly, but many transformations happen through daily surrender, daily prayer, and daily discipline. The enemy wants people stuck in old thinking because old thinking produces old behavior. If your mind never changes, your direction rarely changes. Some people remain trapped in cycles of fear, insecurity, anger, or discouragement because they continue rehearsing the same destructive thoughts year after year. But when your mind begins changing, your life begins changing. Renewed thinking produces renewed strength. A transformed mind sees obstacles differently. Instead of panicking immediately, it learns to trust God. Instead of assuming defeat, it believes breakthrough is still possible. Instead of focusing only on problems, it begins focusing on purpose, growth, and opportunity. There is power in changing the language you use about yourself and your future. Stop speaking defeat over your life. Stop labeling yourself by your past mistakes, failures, or disappointments. Some people continue carrying identities God never gave them because they have repeated negative words over themselves for too long. Your words reinforce your mindset. If you constantly speak hopelessness, hopelessness will grow stronger. But when you begin speaking life, faith, peace, and confidence, your spirit slowly becomes stronger. Transformation begins internally because God cares about more than outward success. He wants peace within your heart, clarity within your mind, and stability within your spirit. And when your thinking becomes renewed, you say, stop living controlled by fear, insecurity, and negativity. You begin walking with confidence, wisdom, peace, and strength because your mind is no longer chained to destructive thinking. One of the greatest mistakes people make during difficult seasons is believing that their current struggle is the end of their story. Pain has a way of convincing people that nothing will ever change. When disappointment lasts longer than expected, when prayers seem unanswered, When doors remain closed and when life becomes emotionally exhausting, it becomes easy to feel trapped in hopelessness. Many people quietly wonder if they will ever recover, ever heal, or ever become strong again. But temporary struggles should never be mistaken for permanent destinations. Every storm has an expiration date, even when it feels endless. Every painful season eventually passes. Difficult moments may last longer than you expected, but they will not last forever. The problem is that when people are surrounded by pie, and they often lose perspective, fear magnifies the struggle, discouragement clouds the future, exhaustion weakens hope, and slowly people begin believing that because life feels hard now, it will always remain hard. But God never promised that struggles would define your entire life. Seasons change, circumstances shift, pain evolves, healing comes, growth develops, strength returns. The very season that almost broke you can eventually become the season that transformed you into a wiser, stronger, and deeper person. Some of the strongest people you admire today were shaped in painful seasons nobody saw. Their wisdom came through struggle. Their strength came through pressure. Their maturity came through disappointment. Their faith grew through uncertainty. Growth rarely happens during comfortable seasons. Most transformation happens when life becomes uncomfortable enough to force people to depend on God differently. The enemy wants people to quit during temporary pain because he knows. WS, what could happen if they endure long enough to see what God is building within them? Many people abandon hope too early because they cannot see the purpose behind their struggle. They focus only on what hurts instead of what is being developed through the pain. Sometimes God uses difficult seasons to build endurance inside you. Endurance cannot grow without resistance. Just as muscles grow stronger through pressure and tension, spiritual and emotional strength often develops through challenges. People naturally want quick solutions and immediate comfort, but deep maturity is rarely produced instantly. Some lessons can only be learned through walking through hard seasons with faith. There are moments when God allows delays not because he is ignoring you, but because he is preparing you. Preparation often happens in hidden seasons where nothing seems to be changing externally. You may feel forgotten while God is actually developing patience, wisdom, humility, discipline, and character. Stir within you. Many people want the blessing without the preparation, but unprepared people often misuse what they prayed for. Pain also has a way of revealing what truly matters. During difficult seasons, people discover where their trust truly rests. Hardship exposes weaknesses, fears, insecurities, and unhealthy dependencies that comfort once hid. Sometimes God allows pressure because pressure reveals areas within the heart that still need healing and transformation. Many people ask God to remove every storm immediately, but some storms arrive to strengthen what comfort weakened. Difficult seasons teach people how to pray differently, trust differently, think differently, and depend on God more deeply. Struggle often becomes the classroom where wisdom is developed. There are people listening who feel emotionally tired because life has not unfolded the way they expected. They imagine certain doors would open by now. They believe certain prayers would already be answered. Heart healing would happen faster. They expected peace to come sooner. But disappointment does not mean abandonment. Delays do not mean denial. Just because you cannot see movement does not mean God is inactive. Sometimes the greatest danger during painful seasons is allowing temporary emotions to create permanent decisions. Fear can make people quit too soon. Discouragement can make people isolate themselves. Hopelessness can make people stop believing in the future God still has for them. But your emotions are not always accurate indicators of what God is doing behind the scenes. There are moments when life feels confusing because God is working in ways you cannot yet understand. Seeds grow underground before they ever become visible above the surface. In the same way, transformation often happens invisibly before outward breakthrough appears. While you feel frustrated by the lack of visible progress, God may already be rebuilding your heart, renewing your mind, and strengthening your spirit for the next chapter of your life. Do not allow temporary suffering to convince you that your future has been ruined. Some chapters are painful, but they are not the entire story. Some seasons feel heavy, but they are not permanent homes. The storm may be difficult, but storms eventually pass. There are people who became stronger because they refused to quit during their hardest season. They kept praying when answers felt delayed. They kept believing when circumstances looked impossible. They kept moving forward even when emotions told them to give up. Strength is often developed through continuing to trust God while walking through uncertainty. Your current struggle may feel overwhelming now, but one day you will realize that what tried to break you actually built resilience within you. The pressure that felt unbearable was producing endurance. The disappointment that felt painful was developing wisdom. The waiting season that frustrated you was teaching patience and truth. UST. God is able to bring purpose out of painful seasons. He can turn struggle into strength, pain into wisdom, weakness into maturity, and brokenness into testimony. What feels temporary now may eventually become part of the story that helps someone else survive their own storm. And even in seasons where you feel emotionally exhausted, spiritually weak, or mentally overwhelmed, God is still working beyond what your eyes can currently see. Writing variant equals standard ID equals 76425. There is power in the words people speak over their lives. Words are not empty sounds that disappear into the air without impact. What you repeatedly speak eventually influences what you believe, and what you believe influences how you live. Many people are unknowingly strengthening fear, weakness, and hopelessness because of the language they constantly use about themselves and their future. They speak defeat before the battle even begins. They speak failure before they even try. They speak fear so often that fear becomes the atmosphere surrounding their thoughts. Some people wake up every day already expecting disappointment. They speak negatively about their future, their purpose, their abilities, and their situation. Over time, those words slowly shape their mindset. Eventually, they stop seeing possibility because they have trained themselves to expect defeat. Negative speech becomes agreement with fear, and agreement with fear weakens confidence, peace, and faith. The enemy understands how powerful words are. That is why he constantly tries to fill people with discouraging thoughts and hopeless language. He wants people to declare weakness over themselves. He wants them to speak failure, fear, insecurity, and doubt repeatedly until they eventually believe those lies completely. Many battles are lost internally because people have spent years speaking against themselves instead of speaking life into their future. Faith is not denying reality. Faith is believing that God's power is greater than your current situation. Speaking faith does not mean pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to let fear become the loudest voice in your life. Some people only speak based on what they currently see, but faith speaks based on what God is still able to do. There are moments when life becomes difficult and speaking positively feels almost impossible. Pain has a way of making negative thoughts feel natural. Disappointment makes discouragement easier to believe. Delays make hopelessness feel convincing. But your words matter most during the seasons when life feels hardest. Anyone can speak hope when circumstances are easy. Real faith speaks peace during chaos, strength during weakness, and confidence during uncertainty. Many people are trapped not because they lack opportunity, but because they have spent years speaking limitation over themselves. They constantly say things like, "I will never change. Nothing good ever happens to me. I am too broken. I am too weak," or "my future is hopeless." Over time, those statements become internal beliefs that shape their actions and decisions. Eventually, they stop expecting growth because they have already convinced themselves defeat is permanent. But God never intended for his people to live speaking death over their own lives. He wants people to speak with faith, confidence, wisdom, and hope. Words have the power to either strengthen your spirit or weaken it. The language you use daily either builds courage or feeds fear. Some people underestimate how much their environment affects their thinking. Constant negativity drains strength from the mind and spirit. When people constantly surround themselves with fear-filled conversations, criticism, gossip, bitterness, and discouragement, it slowly influences their outlook on life. Fear grows where negativity is constantly fed. But faith grows where truth, hope, prayer, and encouragement are consistently planted. Speaking faith requires intentional disciples. Blind because negative thinking comes naturally during difficult seasons. Fear will always try to speak first. Doubt will always try to dominate your perspective. Anxiety will always try to convince you that disaster is coming. But you must learn to challenge those thoughts instead of automatically agreeing with them. Sometimes the greatest spiritual battle happening in your life is the battle over what you choose to believe and declare daily. The enemy wants your words to reinforce defeat, while God wants your words to align with hope and trust. Your future cannot grow properly in an atmosphere filled with constant negativity and hopelessness. There are people listening who need to stop calling themselves weak every time life becomes difficult. Stop labeling yourself by your failures, your mistakes, or your painful experiences. Your current struggle is not your identity. Your difficult season is not your permanent name. God sees greater potential in you than you currently see in yours. Elf, trusting God also means refusing to panic every time life becomes uncertain. Fear often causes people to make emotional decisions that create unnecessary damage. Anxiety pushes people toward hopelessness because it convinces them they must control every outcome themselves. But faith allows people to remain steady even when they do not fully understand what God is doing. There are moments when trusting God means continuing to move forward despite unanswered questions. Sometimes you will not immediately understand why certain doors